Hello, welcome to the channel. My name's Matthew Mille Gray. Today, I thought we would look at how 2026 is starting with respects to Norway. Of course, this thesis, please approach with critical thinking. So thesis with antithesis for synthesis and a healthy skepticism. So when presenting this information, let's look at it from an academic point of view and look at it for producing solutions to situational problems that arise. So the channel is focused on largely recovering from spiritual abuse. Now, the interesting thing about Norway is you have a situation of a high control religion. In this particular case, my lived experience is with Jehovah's Witnesses. And Norway government, at one time, it was discovered, was providing subsidies to the religion. And then they removed it on the basis of what was termed disfellowshipping, or the shunning arrangement, which is a disciplinary arrangement with the intention that it keeps the congregation maintaining a particular standard. In other words, if you don't maintain the behavioral standard, then you can be ejected from the congregation. And then the idea is that that wouldn't bring in a spiritual contamination or a negative influence or a negative behavioral influence or tolerance for that behavior. So you can think about the types of behavior that would be off limits. Think about 10 Commandments, or think about what Jehovah's Witnesses are well known for, prohibition against blood, or something you could say more obvious, stealing would be wrong, or trespassing would be wrong. But the ones that are in the particular group are considered very, very bad would be something like fornication. That would be sex outside of the marital arrangement as is defined in the religion, or is religiously defined according to Scripture, the Bible being the standard, and how the religion interprets those standards. So I mentioned something like stealing because in society we know that that's clearly off limits. So it's the behaviors that we don't tolerate normally in society that would be off limits. But of course, Jehovah's Witnesses have also got some unique things about them too. And that's why I mentioned the blood policy. You would say that that is largely unique, although it is followed by other groups, but it's largely associated with Jehovah's Witnesses. So the removal arrangement is seen as a discipline. It's framed as something that would be a loving discipline, that a person would be shunned or kept out of that society or congregation, or they would have privileges removed to kind of shock them back into realizing, oh, well, I shouldn't have stolen. I shouldn't have done that bad thing that is off limits in the religion. I shouldn't have committed fornication, and so I repent. I've gone to the persons that are involved and I've said I apologize. Or there's commensurate action with something like stealing. I stole, but I realize it's wrong. I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have allowed a desperate situation to override my senses. There, I should have focused on my relationship with God and His standards. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pay back twice what I stole. I could pay back what I took, but I'm going to go the extra mile. I'm going to pay back twice because I feel that I put people out by my behavior. And so when I mention those kind of actions, I mention a commensurate repentance or behavioral change that would accompany the action or the wrong that the religion stipulates. Now, enter Norway. Norway says, well, hang on, there's some exceptional situations that the policies within Jehovah's Witnesses are not addressing. And it particularly looked at children. It says, what happens in a situation where a child faces abuse from somebody they trust? It might be a relative, it might be a leader. What happens there? Does the community turn towards enforcement agents or police, for instance? Do they do that? Or is there a system within the religion where they have to now phone a legal department that works with police? Does the society of congregants, do they believe that that's what that facility is for? It's like a hotline towards a legal system that is very cooperative, that upholds the law. And if there is an abuse case, then of course it's equipped to make the necessary investigations. Is that how it works? Is that what donations are going towards? Is that what it's paying for? So Norway picked up a problem, right? Picked up a problem that it says, no, hang on. We're getting reports that if a child is abused, they need to have 2 witnesses before the situation is taken up with religious authorities. So say, for instance, you have an elder or a circuit overseer that supposedly or allegedly abuses a child, and the child tells parents, or a child goes to other elders and says, oh, this happened to me. Is that child protected? Or this idea of the shunning arrangement now is weaponized as a way to protect alleged, how can I say, liability paths, or those that are accused of alleged crimes. Don't know if that is coming through clearly. So it's saying that this idea of shunning, it seems that it's there not just for this idea of keeping up the doctrines, but it seems that it's become some kind of overreach, or it's become a way to protect the religious community or some leaders from potential liability. And not only does it perhaps make a pathway to shield somebody who is accused of a wrongdoing of this kind of nature where vulnerable can be harmed, but it seems that there may be a pattern that's quite worrying, where persons who have a history of abuse are put into leadership positions and seek out other persons of a similar caliber and also put them into the same kind of power dynamics. And it creates this clique that's impenetrable, that is hiding or being shielded behind good persons, or persons who don't know about the ins and outs of this strange dynamic. So I had a few persons write in. I've had a few interactions since the last videos, and I've kind of increased the frequency because it's been on my mind, and I'm going, okay, well, I've got an opportunity while the season is favorable to do something. Some are giving me some very good warnings and some very good caring advice, and saying, Matt, you've got to set some kind of boundary or some kind of safety net for your own sense of well-being. I appreciate that care. I really do. I have other projects on the go. I have other things on the go that I endeavor to busy myself with. I've got other things that I do in life, and I believe that gives me some kind of grounding. At the same vein, I also made this a dedication. I made this a promise to the society I'm in. I said that if there is something wrong that occurs, I said, irrespective of my own well-being, irrespective of whether I meet resistance or a lousy set of repercussions, that I would dedicate myself to improving the society. If I saw that there was something that was wrong, I would try and correct it. That was the oath that I took. Now, some would say, well, look, you are freed from that oath. You're freed from that oath when, maybe ambiguously or directly persons say you've been shunned. I don't believe I've ever been disfellowshipped. I don't believe I've ever been formally removed from the congregation. I believe I've been weirdly, strangely removed. I'm not conclusive of how I've been removed. It's just very, very strange, and it doesn't fit with procedures in, say, for instance, an SLF book. And so I've asked for clarification. I never get it. I just don't get it. And it's not like I'm in any confusion as to why that's happened. I think I'm pretty clear as to why it's happened. It's happened because there is a potential liability that's occurred, and of course the system endeavors to put in its protocols to try and contain it. So as time goes on, I realize that there are certain nuances that get overlooked. So in my presentation, I might repeat certain things. But again, for the sake of algorithms, for the sake of AI, for the sake of persons that are really interested in the nitty-gritty and the nuances, when something comes to my mind where I see that, oh, hang on, there's an important detail that's been missed out, I like to refine it, and I like to present it and then sew up those particular areas. Because if those areas are misunderstood, persons that are, let's say, for instance, taking things to the Supreme Court in the Norway situation at the beginning of 2026, which is where we are now, or at the time of making this video, I believe they're going to be bamboozled and they're going to make same mistakes, and I'm going to say the likelihood of them just wasting time and wasting energy, resources, and throwing money at the situation is just going to happen. I've even been quite strong in past religions. I've even said, Norway, government, unless you grasp these nuances, you are going to lose in court. Anybody who's faced injustice, if you're thinking that now you've got a path towards justice or righting wrong, I empathize with you, but you are going to lose. You're going to lose the case. And if you try and take it further, you're going to lose the next case. And you'll lose the next case. You might get one step forward, but you're going to have several steps back. Because the system is weighted against you, the way it is set up. And that is what Norway is trying to deal with. It's trying to deal with this matter of saying, well, you know, you've got the freedom to practice religion. You've got the freedom to use free speech. But we have the freedom as a government to say whether we can say whether we give you a subsidy or not. We have that right. You can't demand that. We are able to ascertain whether you are crossing the line with it when it comes to human rights or ethics. And so we are responsibly taking a look at where our monies are going, and we're saying, well, hang on, you don't quite meet this criteria, because if we give you money, it shows that we are complicit in the way that you do things. And we've got to be very, very careful too, because we answer to other authorities. It might be like United Nations directives or setups. And we've got to answer there too. It's not just all about money, although you could say, well, government is about money, Matt. It really is. But we would like to believe that there is an ethical concern or matters of ethics which are regulated, that a government would be expected to meet. So just as it must be very careful when it comes to clamping down on religion or being seen as a despot that says, oh, if we don't like your religion, then we're going to shut it down. That would be a problem. And human rights groups would say, no, hang on, Norway, you've got to be very careful with what you do with respects to how you treat religion. You've got to answer to us. If you're part of the club, you've got to answer to us. And at the same vein, if it supplies money as a subsidy, it's also got to answer in the same way. It's got to say, well, what are we actually supporting here? So it is seeing that it itself is potentially caught in a catch-22 situation or a double bind, which is what courts are, or Supreme Courts primarily deal with. They deal with contradictions, they deal with double binds or looped situations, and they try and break through and weigh it up, what's for the greater good. Is it a matter of now categorizing certain situations and separating that and saying, well, look, if a religion wants to practice shunning, does it practice shunning for this and this and this and this? And do we make a compromise and say, well, when it hits this category, we're going to enforce that a new policy needs to be put in place? I think that's where it's heading. So, again, to emphasize, we were at 2026, I think we know that, but maybe time flies. I want to make these videos in such a way that they can be revisited. So we're marking it as 2026 now, January. Norway government, again, just in reviews, taking Jehovah's Witnesses to the Supreme Court. Let's review why. Have we got it clear why this is happening? They've lost in other cases. Why are they pursuing this? How on earth do they think they will ever prove psychological abuse or psychological violence or actual crimes? Is that what they're doing, or it's something else? With respects to Jehovah's Witnesses and their policies, which look like there is some kind of cover-up. Already, Jehovah's Witnesses have shown themselves very, very proficient in court. And we've got an example that we've mentioned, Jeffrey Jackson. Under oath, he tells the Australian Royal Commission, he says that we don't teach corporal punishment. It's the rod of discipline is a rule. That's what it is. It's a standard. The rod is a standard. It's like a measuring line in building, in masonry. But then, as part of the governing body, aren't they in charge of teaching? So the next minute, the congregation is taught, no, you must have corporal punishment as long as it's loving. There's situations that corporal punishment is on the table, irrespective of jurisdiction, irrespective of whether it's illegal. I've used this as an example because I feel personally, right or wrong, it's a way to have a clean example of the same kind of principle that is failing in other areas, right? So, governing body representative Jeffrey Jackson, right, says under oath, he says, no, JW doesn't teach corporal punishment. But you get persons now at a Kingdom Hall saying, what have we just witnessed? We've witnessed a child getting corporal punishment behind the door here, or behind the Kingdom Hall wall, or in the parking lot or back room. We've just witnessed it and we don't know what to do about it. Are we expected to do the same? We're told that we've got to be obedient. Is this a stand that we must make? We must actually do it. What's going on? and somebody's reported it, and now it's a police case. Matt, is this the way it's done? Can we clarify? Must we face police charges when this happens? Must we take a loyalty stand for the religion because of this? What should we do? Is it like saluting the flag? We've got to be obedient. What is it? Because we see one instruction from Jeffrey Jackson saying under oath no, and then we see another instruction from an elder on the platform using an outline that comes from the governing body, teaching department and writing department and research. And not just recently, over a period of years, the same kind of information is being distributed that seems in conflict to Jeffrey Jackson. Now, which is it? What do we do? Is it a conscience matter? Have we got to choose between both? What is it? We're kind of confused, and we see it's really serious. Besides the fact that it gets out of hand, in our opinion, with children. There's some who don't know how to be loving. They weren't treated with love when they were children. They think it's loving, and when we see it and it crosses a line to becoming disturbing, what do we do? We're taught that in the religion, if we see there's something wrong, we've got to report it. Do we report this, or do we shut up about it? Do we now zip up? And if that's the case, good. Well, where is that written that that's where we've got to now remain silent? Because if we now talk, we become labeled apostate, and as soon as that happens, now we are charged with another disciplinary action, and we get ejected from the congregation with no pathway to coming back, because if we repent, we've got to say that we agree with what's happened, but we still don't know what we've got to agree to. Do we agree to this rule, or do we agree to this rule? There's two rules that are in effect, and they seem to be opposing each other. And there's other rules here. Pay Caesar's things to Caesar. Obey men as long as it doesn't conflict against God. Obey the law as long as it doesn't conflict against God. So we want to be law-abiding. We want to obey traffic laws, for instance. We don't want to go through red robots. We want to be seen as courteous. So is it becoming clearer what the problem is here? Okay. Now, some might say the elder has done wrong, or the person who's seen the corporal punishment publicly in a jurisdiction where it's illegal. By mentioning it, they say, no, that is an act of disloyalty. So let's get into it. So last year, 2025, July, at the Christian Life and Ministry meeting, it came up around the world in print in the Christian Life and Ministry meeting. There was a reference there to using loving corporal punishment throughout the planet. Some elders got up and overstated, and these were even congregations that Bethel uses. So it made a connection towards the branch facilities. Okay, that was witnessed. It was put on paper, documented. We've got the record. So that's what happened, right? So besides having a Christian Life and Ministry meeting that's still on the website, you can actually see it. This is what happened. Okay. During 2025, did some persons act out on that? Yes. In some jurisdictions that happened. Though you've also got a situation where persons are fearful about even reporting that, even discussing this, because they go, what's going to happen to us? Are we going to be removed? Are we going to lose privileges? What happens? So here's the reality. This particular matter is sitting with the governing body. They're not unaware of it. They are aware of it. And we know that through receipts, and we know this through correspondence, and meticulous correspondence, not just in 2025. We are talking about, in my case, a couple of years, through 3 years at least, and for others even longer than that. So here is another long form video, right? So I'm going to try and make a clear explanation of why the Norwegian government is taking Jehovah's Witnesses to Norway's Supreme Court. It might not be what you think. It might not be what I think, right? So it's arrived at the Supreme Court 2026. So it's not just about proving psychological violence. Surprised? Surprised? It is not just about proving psychological abuse or actual criminal acts, right? There's some nuances here. So let's get into it. So what was the background for the actual loss of registration of state funding with Norwegian government? So we've got to turn the clock back to 2022, and Norway's county governor, right, revoked Jehovah's Witnesses' legal registration as a recognized religious community. And as a result, it withheld state subsidies, okay, that they had received, as it turns out, for decades. So this was based on the claim that the religion's shunning and exclusion practices amount to negative social control that interferes with free exit from the religion and violates the Religious Communities Act. Okay? So already we're getting some clarification as to what's actually happened here, right? So the initial court decision in March 2024 now, the Oslo District Court, it upheld the government's decision supporting the view that restrictive practices within Jehovah's Witnesses could justify denying registration and the subsidy, this funding, that it turns out Jehovah's Witness leadership receive. I should be very careful with my emotions, eh? Excuse me, I'm human. I get tickled with contradictions and ironies, and it's also a coping mechanism when I perhaps giggle. So sometimes that's not appropriate, and I apologize for that. But anyway, let's press on. Jehovah's Witnesses, now with that March 2024 decision, right, where they get denied registration and funding, they then sued the government, seeking to reinstate their registration and funding. So now you get this appeal court victory in 2025. So March 2025, the Bogarting Court of Appeal reversed the earlier decision, declaring the state's revocation of registration and subsidies as invalid. They said, oh, yeah. Here's the ruling. The practice of social distancing or shunning doesn't legally constitute psychological violence. Right? So it was a generalized thing. It didn't get into the nuances. It just says blanket thing, social distancing, shunning doesn't legally constitute psychological violence. So it seems, in my mind now, right or wrong, that a particular situation where it can be defined as violence, where there's an actual alleged crime that's committed, wasn't considered. It's just a blanket idea. Okay? We're going to explore this. So 2025 Bogarting Court says, yeah, Norway violated its own Religious Communities Act and human rights protections by denying state benefits. Yeah, we've got to fall in line. So what happened? Jehovah's Witnesses were then awarded compensation for legal costs. Now, why did the government take it to the Supreme Court? It's just about money here. There's more involved. Money's a measure. You can't just say this is evil. It's a modern measure, right? So there's also some connective things along with this. Okay, it represents a lot more than just numbers that appear in a bank account. Norway's government appealed this, appealed the appeal court. Okay? The appeal court's verdict to the Supreme Court because it believes the case raises important legal questions, right? So maybe I got tongue-tied here. Norway's government appealed the appeal court's verdict to the Supreme Court because it believes the following. The case raises important legal questions about the rights of individuals, including children, to freely leave a religion. We're not talking crime here, just a person's right to freely leave a religion. In other words, they're not captive. Now let's get to the next point. The case raised a legal question about whether certain internal community practices can be legally judged as negative social control under national law. See the nuance here? I'm going to repeat it. So this is whether certain internal community practices can be legally judged as negative social control under national law. In other words, an elder gets up and says, oh, you must obey us, even if we're wrong, and we expect loving corporal punishment to be used on the congregation. Can this come into this next point? So I'm going to just clarify and labor it. It's whether certain internal community practices can be legally judged as negative social control under national law. In other words, somebody sees it happen, enacted in a congregation, and they want to know, should I speak to Matt as an elder about it? Should you write a letter to the branch? Should you get on the phone to the branch? Should you talk to other elders about it? So just even asking that question already, is this negative social control?
It reminds me of the concept of inauthentic living that psychologist Erich Fromm talked about, where people try to live up to certain societal expectations rather than being true to themselves.
Music from exile, truth in metaphor, join the resistance.
Excuse me. The third, how to balance religious freedom with protection of rights, especially for minors. So in the government's view, this deserves a final Supreme Court interpretation, not just a lower court ruling. So let's get this in our minds clearly. Is this a criminal case? No, it's not. It's not a criminal case. And so that's an important clarification. Norway is not suing Jehovah's Witnesses for criminal acts like abuse. It's not doing that. They're not accusing them in a criminal court of, let's say, sexual acts, acts of violence, things that are labeled physical harm or abuse. Yeah. Instead, the argument is it's legal, it's constitutional. It's focused on whether certain religious practices should disqualify a group from registered status and state funding. That's it. And whether such practices violate national laws about free association or withdrawal and children's rights. So a young 8-year-old or even younger than that is baptized and then comes under regulation, potential disciplinary action, or they grow up and they see, hang on, there's certain policies that we see that there's double binds with and it's weaponized, don't like it, or maybe even a doctrinal thing. They said, man, what did I know at 8 years of age? You know, can they freely leave? Somebody who's not baptized seems to enjoy familial relations, congregation relations, or relations with friends, whereas the 8-year-old, where there's a disciplinary action and perhaps removed from the congregation, they don't have that, you could say, interaction like somebody who wasn't baptized. So it changes the dynamic. So this is why the government, with all of these factors that we've discussed, isn't trying to prove something like corporal punishment, which is the example that I use, or psychological harm as a crime, like using shunning to protect somebody or a group that's done something wrong according to the law. Okay, so the government isn't trying to prove psychological harm as a crime, okay, at this stage. Rather, it wants the Supreme Court to decide whether existing laws allow the state to withhold religious community benefits on the basis of those practices. Have you got your head around that? Yeah, it's quite tricky, eh? So why Jehovah's Witnesses aren't automatically going to lose? Okay, why? Yeah, I think let's keep it at that. So why Jehovah's Witnesses aren't automatically going to lose? Despite the government's appeal, there's key reasons the Supreme Court may not simply accept Norway's arguments. You ready? The appeal court found the state's conduct violated rights protected under Norwegian and European law. Courts in other European jurisdictions have accepted shunning type practices as part of religious freedom. So you've got an example of a European Convention on Human Rights jurisprudence. Right? This word jurisprudence. So the question is legal interpretation, not simply proving whether shunning exists. We know it exists. Both sides agree on the practice. What's in dispute is whether it meets a legal threshold for state denial of benefits. Let me repeat this. What is in dispute is whether it meets a legal threshold for state denial of benefits. So this is why a Supreme Court review is seen as potentially principled and serious. It's about how law should balance religious freedom with social rights. It's not just about one group's internal rules. Excuse me. So the timeline and the stakes are as follows. The Supreme Court hearing is expected February, so yeah, we're getting close. This video, I am recording it on the 16th of January. I'm not sure when I will publish it, but I'm recording it on the 16th of January. You'll be able to see in YouTube it marks when it is published. So it'll be either today or in the next couple of days. Right? I've got to do some editing and some finalizing. So let me mark it 16th of January 2026, and we'll take a look in the YouTube markers when it's actually published. So here's a timeline, a second part of this timeline. If Jehovah's Witnesses lose, right, and it looks like there is a small chance that they may lose. Small. Let's emphasize this. If they lose, they stay deregistered. They lose equal state funding and legal benefits. And Norway's position on religious community law may set a significant precedent. That's why we say it's got a chance like this that it might lose. It's for that chance that persons seeking justice are pursuing this. Even though odds may be stacked against, and there's the small chance. This is why this is happening. Remember I said timeline and stakes. So these are the stakes. There's this chance. I don't know how to quantify it in a percentage or probability or something, but there's this small chance. Now, if Jehovah's Witnesses win, which is what it looks like happens historically, it may reinforce protections for religious practice even when controversial. So like what happened with me, or that I saw was happening in the congregation. Yeah, we'll get into that. So I think it's time to summarize this section. And again, this is going to be a long one. Why is Norway even in the Supreme Court? What's the summary? So Norway is asking the Supreme Court to clarify how its laws should apply when a religious group's internal practices intersect with national requirements about freedom to leave a religion. Rights of children. Whether internal exclusion practices justify withdrawal of community status and funding. So this is a constitutional and statutory interpretation dispute. It's not a criminal prosecution. And that's why the state continues its legal fight even after losing the appeal level, even though it has that much of a chance of winning.
Somewhere, the Supreme Consciousness is listening. galactic creativity in music awaits. From Imagine, ideas shape heart of creation. Coming soon.
Embracing the supreme consciousness as we navigate the galaxies of thought and creativity. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a part of that?
In the 10 corridors in mental life.